by request from Powerful, I decided to actually benchmark the crappy PC I put together. I guess I shouldn't call it crappy. I'd say it's a shit snack, really. It's codenamed Night Train, named after the Guns N' Roses song of fame, and the really cheap but crappy liquor of the same name, Night Train. You want to get messed up, get some Night Train. This is an AMD FX 6300 build on an MSI 970A G64 or G46, that damn dyslexia kicking in again, MOBO, paired off of 8GB of G.SKILL RAM. I think it's running at 1300 megahertz or something like that. I can't remember off the top of my head. Did I say the GPU is an R7 370? In all honesty, this build was built as a wedding gift. It's taken me a year to bring it together. Most of the parts are salvaged, used, or rebuilds by yours truly. I tried to the graphics card kinda took a real beating from UPS. I mean, they beat the hell out of it. So I got it up and running. It might be underperforming and thermal throttling. Also, as we all know, the older AMD stuff isn't exactly anything to write home about. And this build's gaming performance is proof of that. The 6300 the fan just runs so loud you'd think that the CPU was ready to explode. And the R7 370 thermal throttles so hardcore it sounds like a jet engine running. How loud is it? I'll let you hear as I slap a cat. The funny thing is, putting a fan next to the computer not only made it run cooler, obviously, but it was a hell of a lot quieter with a full fan on it. That is sad, yet quite humorous. But no one's here to hear me talk about this computer as a whole. If you're wondering about the program that I'm using in the background showing the load on the CPU, heat, etc., it's CAM by NZXT. Might be worth giving it a check out. I found it to be pretty intuitive. I didn't want to create an account, but whatever. Back to the point of Hellblade. In the opening scene, the beginning of the game, obviously, there's little to nothing for it to render other than some particle effects, fog, and off distant light. At very high, it can maintain 30 FPS. I also want you to keep in mind this one caveat, if you will, that the Relive software, honestly, in my personal opinion, does not translate well to older AMD GPUs whatsoever. You can receive past a 10% drop in performance of your games while using Relive, which was very much the case here with Hellblade. With Relive off, Hellblade jumped up 10 to 12 frames per second, which could definitely offer you a lock 30 FPS in most instances of medium and high settings. The game began to tank the second any cutscene came in. I would see drops as low as 19 frames, but it tried to keep itself alive at 24 to 26, but at the time it did not know it had to do with Relive. This game is playable perfectly at medium settings, or a mix of high and medium settings without you being completely and utterly disgusted by the presentation. Believe me, you do not want to play Hellblade at low settings. The textures are atrocious. It's an eyesore. I don't recommend it. It's lower than what a console would be. So don't even bother. And remember, Relive is not your friend with an old AMD GPU such as this. Maybe it's nicer on the R9 series cards because they're better suited for stuff, but certainly not the R7s. Overall, the verdict here, in this instance, Hellblade is acceptable for playing at a stable 30 FPS, or higher depending on what texture settings you decide to use. I would strongly recommend medium to high. Overall, I don't think most people are running out to grab an R7 370 graphics card because currently I feel they're overpriced. New ones are still going for $200, and used ones on eBay can run you anywhere from $70 to $150, and frankly, the R7 370 is not worth that. For the same price of $150, you can get a 1050 Ti, and it would crush most modern games. It would destroy anything the R7 370 could ever hope to do by leaps and bounds. Let's say you don't have that much money to give for an R7 370. then you could get like a used 760. It's better than the R7 370, trust me on that. I've tested it. Or a 770. Granted, it's a kind of a gamble getting a 770. Sometimes you can find a 770 for $80 to $100, 4GB model. Sometimes you're stuck with a 2GB model. It depends on how patient you are, how much time you have, and just about that really, and money you're willing to spend. Once again, you go too far, you may as well get something newer. I also forgot to add, keep this in mind when getting a graphics card, whether new or used. Do not drop below a 4GB minimum. Don't even waste your time. Always try to have 4GB, because games are just requiring more textures. There's more shit going on. There is no reason to have a 2GB because you'll hit that limit so fast and it's even funny. There are some games that won't even really let you select anything if you don't have the minimum amount of VRAM. For instance, Watch Dogs 2. You can't run anything but low on Watch Dogs 2 with 2GB. I mean, it's a crappy example, but it's true. Do yourself a favor, 4GB minimum. The future games are only going to require more VRAM. It's only an inevitability. Don't be caught out in the cold with 2GB, kicking yourself in the nuts, constantly hitting your VRAM limit. Next up, I attempted to benchmark the most recent Tomb Raider. I figured it'd be a good barometer for a game that's very AMD friendly to a very old AMD card. You'll find that more often than not, I am hitting the VRAM limit. Like literally, the thing is maxed out all the time on high settings. The internal benchmark would almost lead you to believe that this graphics card could handle what I was throwing at it. And in these closed instances, well, at least the first two areas of the benchmark looked pretty good. It seems solid. A nice 30 frames per second at high settings is ideal, especially for this rig. I mean, I wasn't expecting it to perform that well, until it got to the infamous forest area. At that point, you then see that my lack of VRAM and the card's ability becomes painfully evident at the major levels of pop-in that just proceeded to happen during this benchmark scene. It was pretty bad, insanely bad, like Bethesda's Skyrim bad. Benchmarks aren't really a great gauge of the game in and of itself. Once I loaded up a stage, I immediately noticed that I was choking at around 20 to 24 frames per second. I immediately adjusted everything to medium as quickly as possible before I died of PTSD from such low frames. And still, the game looked atrocious. Once again, I did not know at the time that Relive had such an impact on this card. Go away, Smokey! He's such a dick. Also, I forgot to factor in the fact that landscapes with this much detail are not friendly to this card whatsoever. Every time it happens, it begins to die a dog's death. I then begin throwing it on low presets to see how well I'd fare. And still, it was horrible frames. So frankly, the only conclusion was to move away from the landscape area, and the frames went up to a respectable 30. Overall, it's not really a stable 30, in my personal opinion. It's more like a janky 30. Yeah, the system's telling me it's 30 FPS, but it sure as hell don't feel like 30 FPS. In fact, some scenes play out like, it's hard to explain. Like, I go into this one area where Laura gets a gun. There's supposed to be a cutscene where Laura finds this dead guy, he's got a gun next to him, and then she picks up the gun. But, well, I guess the graphics card and the game itself had a little bit of dispute of what was happening next, and everything just got all discombobulated. It was jarring, to say the least. Overall, Rise of the Tomb Raider, probably not the most friendly game to older AMD cards along the R7 line. To play this, you'd probably have to do a mixture of medium and low settings, maybe high on textures. Not the greatest experience, but not the worst. Not up to what I prefer to play at. And in all honesty, if you're building a PC today, usually the recent offerings from Pascal and Polaris are more than enough to play these games at respectable frames for pretty good prices, frankly. So I can't really give you a point to this, simply because I don't think anyone's going to go out of their way to buy an R7. If you had one for free, here's what you could expect to get from it. But there are other options for similar or a little bit more money that have far better performance. Mafia 3 just ran like shit, with or without Relive. Skyrim, you could probably get a lock 30 on very high settings. The game will set it up like that, the special edition version. The only problem is, once again, Relive 10% or more performance drop while using Relive with this graphics card, so it doesn't look like 30 FPS, but it is without it. I did record some stuff with Bandicam, and it was so janky looking, I vomited all over my cat. And then I wrote Bandicam a very nasty message about how I'd never use their stuff for free again. Right. I also benchmarked some older games just to see what I'm dealing with. I guess it's because these games don't come anywhere near the 2 GB limit on ultra settings that it's such a smooth gaming experience. Both of them performed phenomenally, in all honesty, and I guess that's where this graphics card can shine, older stuff, but it does give you the ability to try newer games. The only problem is that VRAM limit if you are like me and only have 2 GB. If you have 4, you probably won't have the issues I've been having, and ignore everything I've said up till now. Also, the older games performed amazingly while using Relive, which was pretty surprising actually. There was little performance drop. Tomb Raider probably hovered around 48 to 50 FPS on ultra settings, and Batman Arkham Knight much the same, except with all the special DX features off. I did take those off on Batman Arkham Knight. I should have seen how it would run, but then I forgot, and I had other obligations in life I had to attend to. Sorry, this isn't exactly a Paul's Hardware. I can't afford to have my setup in my garage, which would be pretty, like, legit. Just imagine how sick it would be to see me in my garage. Well, actually my garage is kind of shitty. But you would see like a sports bike and all this like tools and crap hanging around. It would give you the idea that I'm a man's man. In a day and age where being a strong heterosexual male is frowned upon. I mean, for God's sakes, did you see how many guys got their Ryzen things and they didn't even know what a torque wrench was? It was like it's a torch socket, a torque socket. You know, they're sitting there like, oh, it clicks to let you know that it's tight enough. Like, it's a torque, dude. Maybe if you, I don't know, worked on a vehicle. Gundam, you're a jealous piece of shit. I'm triggered. Last but not least, I took the time to download The Witcher to my extra hard drive to play on this computer. Actually, what's amazing here to me, or maybe, I don't know if you want to label it amazing, but I do, is how well The Witcher actually played on this graphics card. I was expecting it to choke and die on The Witcher 3. Like, I did not think it was possible to play anything but low settings. But to my delight, I found that The Witcher 3 could be playable at a locked 30 FPS, of course with Hairworks off, in a strong mixture of high and medium settings. Basically, you'd probably want a medium, something like foliage and the water's detailing. Those are the two things that will really suck up your frames outside of Hairworks. Once this was done, I was fully capable of playing The Witcher 30 FPS with a few minor drops, you know, little hiccups where it's just like the bottom drops out of the GPU and then it goes back up to 30. And it's to be expected. As I said, this GPU has seen some real hard times, but it performed admirably. And if this GPU can actually play The Witcher at 30 FPS locked, I could only imagine how well The Witcher would play on, I don't know, like, as I said before, a 770 or a 1050 Ti. 1050 Ti probably play this game beautifully at 60 FPS. So keep that in mind if you're graphics card shopping, that this is actually very friendly to lower tier cards. I don't know what to say. Not too low though. You know, don't go any lower than the R7 or else you'll be just completely and utterly dismayed by the lack of performance. But other than that, I hope this is enough to sate those who actually requested me to do this, specifically Powerful. And I'm sure there are other people who were interested. He's the one who contacts me on Twitter, and it's hard for me to keep up with messages now. I know, listen, I'm not saying I'm popular, but I'm certainly getting a hell of a lot more messages than I ever got a year ago. So I'm kind of like, I can't keep up. White Orchard plays perfectly well. You know, no major dips. Pretty smooth all around. But once you get to Velen, I believe it is. Isn't it Velen? I can't remember. The castle area, once you get to there with all the merchants and so on and the NPCs walking around, if you kept NPCs on high like I did, you probably will realize some frame drops to 24 FPS. But once again, this could be due to the nature of Relive. As I said before, it's a pretty good performance hog. I don't know why the AMD counterpart isn't as good as Nvidia's Shadowplay, to me personally. But once again, Relive didn't become a reality till what? Polaris? So I guess it should be expected that it doesn't lend itself too amazingly to older AMD cards. And that ought to do it for me. I feel that this video has been insanely long, and hopefully this answers some questions as to how well it performs. Will this PC perform well? Yeah, I'd say so, especially for the person I'm giving it to, whose old PC is running on DDR2 RAM. So to give you an idea how burnt out his thing is. Also, you might be wondering how much I spent on this PC. As I said before, it's a homogenization of used parts and salvaged broken parts. The CPU, which is a FX 6300, as I stated before, I got that new back when Deus Ex came with the AMD FX processor for 80 bucks. And the power supply I also bought new, which is a Rosewell 450 watt bronze. Currently it's $37, but I got it off Newegg when they're on sale for $29 shipped. So all in all, I paid around $110 or so-ish, you know, rounding off. So this build really cost me next to nothing. If you were to attempt to recreate this build, I would strongly recommend using used parts, simply because a used FX chip runs about $30 to $40. I'd say that's about what it's worth to me right now. I wouldn't pay $80 for it again, but hey, free Deus Ex, you know? Ironically, it doesn't play anymore for me after the most recent patch. Thanks, Square Enix, you dicks. You could get a better CPU. Like, I've seen i5 3750s going for $80. You know, the same price that I paid for my FX chip. Far better performance. You could get a 2500K for less money. Still better performance than the FX chips, in my opinion. There was a guy who was on Craigslist here. He was selling a 2500K with a MOBO and RAM, $80 flat out. I should have bought it. I went to look at it today because I saw it last night. It was already gone because it was just that good of a deal. So if you're trying to build a PC on the cheap, I'd recommend getting used parts if you can from eBay or whatever, where you have some buyer protection. If you're a bit more adventurous, you could try Craigslist, but you know, that's a gamble and a crapshoot. But you could build something like this at a far cheaper price point. When I went to PC Part Picker, this build costs around $530. And frankly, for the performance, I don't feel it's worth $530. And if you are that hell-bent on building a cheap PC, feel free to email me. We could talk it out. It may take me a little bit to get to you, so don't get pissed. And I'll give you some ideas on really cheap crap we could look for if you're that hell-bent on a cheap PC that can game. And that's exactly what this is. Real cheap. Cost me $110. Everything else was used and salvaged. Don't rebuild this build. It's not worth that money. Unless you get the parts for free, or you can get them at a bargain. And that's seriously going to do it for me. I can actually give more of a shit than me. Rate, comment, subscribe if you so choose. Follow me on social media if you feel like it. If not, screw it, dude. I'm not going to cry river, and neither are you. But if you choose to follow me, it makes my voice louder in the community. And one day I will be heard. And then Papa Gundam's going to get those sweet, sweet press releases. I mean, really, Angry Joe screams you done fucked up to companies and they send him free games, and people are telling me I can't say a few curse words. It's too dirty, but Angry Joe can get stuff and he says curse words. And Review Tech USA, he doesn't even review tech. I'm out of here. Adios, bichachos.